Hello everyone and welcome back to Marian's World with a bit of a different tutorial today because I'm actually making a blind for my sitting room window, and I'll put a picture in here hopefully to show you the window that I'm dealing with. And it's not hugely wide because I live in quite an old house. The windows are quite small. However, this project's been waiting for me to get on with it for over a year, and I'm trying to clear the decks of some small projects because I want to get on with a new vessel that I'm making, and I just wanted to clear up and get some smaller things out of the way. And this is what I thought was going to be one of them, because I actually do have a thrifted roller blind here. And I was going to customise the fabric and, you know, cut it down for my window, but it doesn't fit. And it doesn't fit, it's not the length of the blind or anything, it's the depth of the roller, because I don't have enough depth in my window to take the roller behind my curtains. So the thrifted roller blind is going for the journey, and it'll go back to a charity shop, and I'm going to make myself a Roman blind, and I'm going to show you what I'm making it from. So I've got two lots of fabric that I'm going to be using. Firstly, the front of it is going to be lots of thrifted old vintage linens. So I do have lots of these tray cloths and bits and pieces, things I haven't cut up, things I used to use but I just don't use them anymore. I have the ones that I use all the time. I have my own handmade tablecloths, and they just don't get used anymore. I also have this bit of material here which is very pretty. Now I've decided to use this as a lining so that when my blind is down, this is the pretty bit that shows to the outside, and I'll still have my vintage linens on the inside, the bit that I can see. So that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to show you it all from start to finish. I don't have a kit or anything. I'm doing it from scratch with some bits of wood, bits of dowel, and I'm just going to get right into it. So first of all, I need to go and measure my window, inner width of my window, and it is 44 inches. 112 centimetres. I need to make my blind a little bit narrower than that. I'm not going to worry about the length yet. I'll do that secondary. So first of all, I want to get my lining fabric into a panel that's just under 44 inches wide. The other supplies I've got are some really thin dowels. I went and got these yesterday from the local DIY shop. So they're 6mm in diameter. At the moment they're 4 foot long. They'll have to be cut down because my blind is only going to be about 43.5 inches wide. And I've also got a piece of batten. This is 11mm by 25, which is probably about 1 inch by 1/2 inch. And again, I'll have to cut that down to fit my window. The other thing I've got is some cord to draw my blind up, and I am sure I've got some curtain rings too. I'll have to rummage about, but I'm sure I've got them. So first things first, ironing the fabric. I think this will make a really pretty panel that faces the outside. The material is so lovely. I actually got it a few years ago to make a dress. I just never did it. Just thought it would make a really pretty blind. Window is 44.5 in width, and I'm going to make my blind 43.25. So I'm taking 1 inch and a bit off just for the ease, and because my house is old, my window might not be totally square. So I'm just taking off, this was 55-inch wide material, and I'm just taking off the excess, and that'll be something I can use. This is all the material I've got, and I think that there'll be plenty. I've got just under 2 meters of length here, and my window measures 1.70 m in height from the very top to the very bottom. So I'm just going to keep working with this because I need to put some little pockets in for the dowels, and I need extra for the hems, etc. So first thing is to put a nice narrow hem on both sides of this fabric. I'm just going to press over about 3/4 of an inch, and then I can turn it under as I put it through the machine. I'm just going to start sewing a normal straight stitch down here, and I could pin it, but it's actually just as easy to press the first fold and use your unpicker to just fold that piece in, and if you run it down it'll make a lovely fold for you to stitch against, and then the picker itself can help feed the fabric through. And so I'm just going to do a really nice little seam, a little hem all the way down here, and then I'll re-measure again to get my 43¼ inches, and then I'll do exactly the same to the other side. I've got my sides finished, and I've also turned up a hem, sort of half an inch and then an inch, and I've made that all nice, so that's all seamed in. And so the next thing for me to do is to make pockets for my dowels to go through, because this is where I'm going to attach the rings and the strings that lift my blind up. I think my first pocket needs to be about 6 inches up from the hem. It's hard to give measurements for what you would need to do because it would depend on what rod you're using. These are just 6 mils. I know I keep going from metric to imperial. Anyway, 6 mils, just under 1/4 of an inch. And so for me to make a pocket that easily goes through, I need to make my pocket a 1/2 inch deep, which will allow my 6 mils dowel to slide in. So I am going to now iron a line across there so that I've got something to sew against, and I will measure a 1/2 inch and I'll put a line right across, and I'm going to do that before I work out where my other pockets need to be. I'm just going to put a few pins in just to keep the fabric perfectly aligned. Right, my first rod pocket is done, and I've been working out what size of pleat that I need, and it really is just the same as the bottom piece that I've left, because remember this is the lining, and the reason I'm working all of this on the lining first is because I'm using vintage linens for the top, which need to be collaged together. So normally you would have been lying your front fabric out and making your lining fit, but I'm doing it the opposite way around just because I'm using tray cloths and what have you for the front, and I'm actually going from the top to the other one is 11 inches, which is just under 28 centimeters, and so I've measured along all the way to make sure that my pressed line is accurate, and I'm going to pin that, and I'm going to sew another pocket, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do every pocket right up my fabric and see where I get to. That's the beauty of working with thrifted and old fabric. You just have to work with what you've got and make it work however you want, because you've got no access to getting any more. Lining is finished as far as I can go. I've got 6 pockets going up my length, and I've actually had to add on the piece that I tore off the width to lengthen my blind lining because I just didn't quite have enough, and that's just because I'm using old fabric and thrifted fabric. I need to just make up what I've got, but if you're doing it from brand new fabric you can definitely do it all in one piece, but I couldn't, I just didn't have the length. So it doesn't matter to me, it's a join on the lining and it'll be fine because it'll be on the outside anyway, and it's just part of using thrifted and old fabric. So before I can finish off the top and get the final length, I need to put my front fabric together, which is all of my vintage linen. So I'm going to lay the lining out on my floor face side down, so that I can patchwork my pieces together and see how I'm going to sew them to get my pretty inside blind that I will see when the blind's down. So back to the sitting room now. So now that it's laid out on the floor, this is now where I can lay my vintage linens to patchwork them together. So I know I want this piece of lace to be along the bottom. This is the reason that I didn't leave my lining to turn this round to the back like you would normally, because I'm trying to preserve the edges of all these bonny linens, and that's why the lining had to be totally completed. And so the first thing is, this is always the one I knew had to be at the bottom, and then put this one down the middle like that. And as soon as I've got a layout, start and sew them together. It's taken me a while, but I've got all of my vintage tray cloths and little tablecloths patchwork together. Some of them have been hand sewn together and some of them have been on the machine. It just depends whether I had to cut them down or not. And I've also hand sewn the crocheted edging onto the bottom. My next job is to attach the lining to the front all the way around. At the top part up here, that's still raw edge at the moment until I work out my exact length and get my batten, and I've got some Velcro to attach it to the batten. Sew right round the edge and cut my dowels down to fit the channels. I've just sewn on the machine right along the bottom edge. So my lining and my front are now together with the little crocheted edging hanging down free, and I've sewn up one side. Now this is not really the traditional proper way of making a blind, because you would put your front fabric around and hand stitch it onto the lining. But I didn't want to fold my edges over because I'm using the bonny edges of the tray cloths. So I'm just matching my finished edge of my lining with the edge of my bonny cloths, and I'm sewing it up. As I've sewn up from the bottom, I've pushed all of the channels up towards the top and I've sewn them closed as I go. So that means that all of my channels are closed, and now I have the other side to do. But obviously I can't sew the channels closed because I need to be able to slot my my rods in. As I go up the other side, I'll be stopping at the channel and then hopping over and doing it like that, so that I go up in between the channels, and then I'll be measuring my bits of wood. In fact, I can measure one now. I thread one of my dowels through. I've got maybe about 4 inches to get off. I'll take it down to about 5 inches. 5 inches to take off every one of my dowels, and then once I've got it all together, I can slot them in, and I've got a little bit of stab stitching to do to connect my lining to my front fabric. Come back up to the channel and I'll skip forward and I'll snip those threads right at the end. I'll skip and start again on the other side. That keeps that pocket open. Little bit of back stitch to start again, and up I go, closing the next side of the blind like that. I'm hoping that I can find enough of them, because that's what my blind cord is going to run through to pull the blind up. So what I am doing here, I've moved to the dining room because really you need a good place to lay your blind out flat, to put your rods in and get the front and the back tacked together, so that when your cords run through and pull your blind up, they're not leaving the front of your blind behind. And so the way that I'm doing that is I am lying out. This, my dining table is the biggest place I can lie out, because my sewing table always has the sewing machine on and all of the rest of my threads. So I'm lying out on the dining table, I put my dowel through the channel, and then that helps keep the channel straight, and then with the blind nice and flat, I am tacking between the lining and the front with a tiny little tacking stitch that only just comes through to the front, just a few threads, but it's enough that when the blind pulls up, the front is going to come with it. And I just move the blind down as I go. I'll make sure that my blind is nice and flat. So there it is, and if I stretch it out from the one I've done previously, I know that my fabric's all nice and smooth. I make sure that the front fabric is nice and smooth too. And I've already measured that I need 14.5 inches in from each side, and I'm making 2 lines of curtain rings going up the middle. I'm using white thread because the white thread will not show up on my white fabric on the front. I'm just using sewing cotton. I'm going to use it double. So I've got my doubled sewing thread with a knot on the end, and I'm going to measure in my 14.5 inches from the end. So I'm right on the bottom of where my machine line sewing is from the bottom of the channel, and I'm just going to pick up a couple of millimeters of fabric, but I know I'm going through to the front. Now you don't have to have a knot on here. I can leave it a little bit loose, and I'm just going to go twice more through just this tiny little tacking stitch. I don't usually mind leaving the knot on, but I'll show you that the proper way is. So I've gone twice through. Now you would just tie that in a knot twice, and then just cut those ends off, leaving them a little bit long so they don't just untangle. But while I'm on here, I'm going to move to the top of the channel, and I'm just going to take a bite of fabric there, and I'm going to sew on one of my curtain rings. I'm using these brass ones because I happen to have them. They're quite big, but it doesn't matter. And I'm going to come through, and I'm going to just blanket stitch it onto the top of this channel. But it means that when the blind pulls up, it's pulling from the place where the lining and the front fabric are tacked together. I do about maybe half a dozen stitches one way, and then I turn round and I do blanket stitches a half a dozen stitches back the other way. It needs to be secure. The weight of the blind will be on these rings, and once I've got them sewn on, I just go through the stitches and then twice round my needle to make a bit of a knot to finish with. So twice through the loop, pull everything up and leave a little tail, not very much, maybe about 1/4 inch. So I'll move along and I'll do my next one on this bar, and then I'll move the whole blind down and do the next one up all the time. I've actually glued my 2 pieces of wood together because I realised the depth of it wasn't enough to get over the handle on my top window, so I've glued them together overnight and left it clamped. So instead of drilling through here, I'm going to be using some heavy duty tape because I don't have anywhere to drill through to put a roll plug to put my batten up. But if you were in a house with wooden frames around, I'd be drilling holes, maybe 3, 1 at each end and 1 in the middle, and then roll plug and screw your batten in. But I'm going to put my blind up with Velcro, and I do have this, which is actually from my mum's stash. I've had it for years and years, and I've used it on and off for all sorts of things. It's actually sticky back, so that's good for the batten, but not so good for my material. But I've also, it's just what I have, and one side's white with the hooks on, and one side's fluffy is black, but it's what I've got, so that's what I'm using. And because I'm using Velcro, because I want to be able to eventually take this down to wash when I need to. And so for that reason as well, I'm going to put the black side on the fabric, because I don't want the hook side to be going in the washing machine, because it'll collect every bit of anything. So I'm going to actually put the hook side onto the batten, and the fluffy side I'm going to stick and then sew onto my blind. And because I don't necessarily want the sewing to be coming through to the front, so there's going to be the finished front of my blind like that. I've ironed it over twice. I've got an inch and then a 2-inch ironed over, but I'm going to just open this up, open that bit up, and I'm going to stick on the fluffy part, but then I'm going to sew it on as well, and then I will fold that down and I will do the hem. But this is really strong sticky on these, so you can get sew-in tape, and then you could not have the sticky back on it, but this is just what I've got. And if you are going to drill and screw this into the top of your window, you could do that first and then stick the Velcro on afterwards once it's installed. I thought I'd make a little diagram of how you string a Roman blind, because you can't just cut all of your cords the same level. So this is my batten that's going to be at the top where the blind will be fixed to, and I've got my rows of curtain rings ready for the strings. I'm going to have my blind pulling down on the left, and so that will be this side because the blind is upside down when I'm stringing it. So first of all, I'll be tying my cord on to each bottom ring, separate cord, and the first one will go up through all of the rings, and then as I lay it down where it hits the batten, that's where I'll put one of my screw eyes, and so the cord can come through there. So each one will go up and I'll put one of my eyes into the batten. But now what has to happen is the cord has to come down so it's long enough for you to get a hold of when the blind is fully opened. So this cord has to come up through the rings, through its own little screw eye, along to the end, and I'll put another screw eye there to collect all of the cords. And then it has to come down. It doesn't have to come all the way, but it has to come down long enough that you're going to be able to get a hold of it. This one has to come up through its own little screw eye, along through that one, through the end one, and down to the same length. This one comes up to its own eye, along through that one, through that one, through that one, and down. And so each one needs to be measured individually through its screw eye, along through all of the others, and down. And so obviously each cord needs to be the length of your blind, however many inches it needs to get along to the end, and then however long you need it to come down. And so only you'll be able to tell on your own blind how long that is. And I do it by just lying my blind on the floor, and I will tie onto the bottom, lead it up, and I'll roughly cut it out. And then when my blind's actually installed, I'll be able to, and the weight of it's on the batten at the top, I'll be able to cut all of my lengths level. So I'm just using these little screw-in eyes. There'll be one for the top of each row of curtain rings, and then one extra to lead all of my cords through and down the side. I've marked all of the holes for my little screw eyes, and when you've got them just started, it's quite nice if you get something like a little screwdriver that you can just put in, and you get extra leverage, and it saves your fingers getting a bit sore trying to push in and turn them at the same time. So I'm just turning that round, and then once it's nicely seated down, I can just leave it, and I'm leaving the rings oriented that way because that's the way they're going to take the cord. Got one more and then the very end one to do. So now that the screw eyes are in, really I need this line to come up through its own screw eye and then along every other one as it goes along, and then down the other side. But because I don't want to have the weight of the blind there as I put my batten up, I'm going to put the batten up by itself and then lift the blind onto it, and I'm going to hope it's going to hold, and then I'll be able to thread all of my things through. I had a look on the internet to see if I could find something that I thought would hold the tape, and I've got this what's called mounting tape, and it said it can hold up to 20 kilos. Well, my blind's not 20 kilos, so I'm going to install this at the top of my window and put my batten on, and then my blind's ready to go up. I've put all my pieces of tape on. It says it has to go vertically. I couldn't run it along, it's not the way it works for the most strength holding. So I'm just pressing them onto my bar, and I'm going to take all the tapes off and press it onto my window. I'll get all my bits of tapes off, and then I'll be able to stick it to my window. And I'll wait a little minute before I try and fix my blind on. Okay, ready to go onto the window. Give it a good press on. I'm leaning all my weight against it to make sure it's pressed on. Right, I'll just let that set for a while, and fingers crossed. In the meantime, I'll take my plants away. Take that whole thing away. It's always supposed to be that the ink in the newsprint makes your windows sparkle. Well, my blind's all installed, and the Gorilla Tape's holding the blind up well, and I'm about to let it down. I've installed a little cleat there that winds the cords round, so that's what's keeping it up at the moment. And I've put one of my holy stones on the bottom as a weight, and I've just done a nice little wrap at the top to make that look nice. All the way down, and that's what it looks like. I think it's really pretty. I'll tell more when it's dark tonight, and I'll put the lights on so it can shine up the pretty fabric. That's an old tablecloth, the old tray cloths. This whole set was a table runner and placemats, and I managed to keep the bunny edges. So all in all, I'm very pleased with that. It looks pretty. I thought I'd show you it now that it's dark. You can see it's just halfway down there, but it goes down nicely behind my plants. And just nicely drops down behind. There we go. Nice and cosy. Well, I am really pleased with my blind, but I realised when I was editing this video that what I hoped was going to be a Roman blind tutorial ended up not being really a traditional way that you'd put one together. So I hope that that you enjoyed it anyway. So it goes up and down nicely, and I know I missed I missed out the piece where I actually put the blind up onto the button. I forgot to turn the camera on to record, so the camera was pointing at me, but it wasn't actually recording anything, so apologies for that. But all I actually had to do was put the velcros together at the top of the window and then lead all those cords through their appropriate screw eyes and down the side. That's all that really did get missed out, but I couldn't believe that I hadn't recorded it. But there you go. I've just fuddled my way through as usual, and you see what you see at the end. So thank you very much for all the suggestions of the flowers for the necklaces, and I will be doing some of them. I've got a daffodil one video to come, and I might make that into a little brooch instead, or even a bracelet. I think it'll look lovely either way, but I'm looking forward to showing you that. I just get piled up with all the ideas, and then something rises to the top and then other things get left behind. It's just the way it is. So thank you for watching. Thanks all for all the support, all the support over on Ko-fi, and all of the comments I get. Just leave me messages of whatever you are interested in. If there's something that you'd quite like me to do, I'm always up for suggestions and things for me to go and watch. So again, thank you very much, and I'll see you next time you come and visit me at Marion's World. Thanks a lot, everyone. Bye bye.